lot of different things, right? And for a long time, that was considered to be like, what is wrong with you? Why don't you know what you want? And it took me a long time to realize that all these different experiences I had, different jobs, weren't really that I didn't know what I wanted. It's more that I saw how everything was connected. And when I could put all these connections together, new opportunities emerged. And they wouldn't have emerged if it wasn't for all of those things. So, my parents are one of those people who are like, why can't you make up your mind and do one thing? So, I can tell mom and dad, you're wrong, that it actually is worth it to learn all these different things and put in. So I pretty much followed what I was interested in, things I was curious about. And all of that led me to my current role, which is an organizational change consultant. It's a fancy way of saying, how can individuals and organizations be prepared to not just survive, but thrive among change? And there's so many reasons why change happens. And there's so many reasons why people react to change in a way that might not be helpful. So I call this seeing around the corners, because I think that's a reality for most of us, whether it's in our personal lives. I mean, hello, COVID, whose life has not been turned around in the last 2 years, but also with organizations. There's so much happening among organizations these days. And I want to talk a little bit about some of those changes are. So this is not meant to be me talking for the next 90 minutes. I promise I don't think my voice will hold up that much. And also, I like conversations a whole lot more. So please chime in if you see something you agree with, if you want to discuss something in more detail. I will adopt the agile practice of responding to change or following a plan. The slide deck is the plan. If we don't follow it, that will make me very happy. But I will start sharing the slide just so that we have a starting point. Okay. All right. So as I said, this applies both to individuals and organizations. And this is not, as you notice, there's nothing about agile in here. This isn't about whether you're doing agile or not. It's just really about how do you look around the corners so that we can prepare for the future. And just about every organization I work with is facing these three threats. The first one, the rate of change. And the best way to think about it is, do you feel like everything around you is changing? And I would ask that for all of you. Do you generally look around and feel like everything around you is changing? Does that resonate? Okay, so I'm seeing some nods and stuff. Okay. So when you feel like everything is changing, everything that you can think of to do seems like it's creating more problems. That for every action, there's 10 possible consequences, and there's not really the obvious right and wrong answer. Does that resonate? So this to me is just recognizing the kind of challenges organizations are facing are just more complex than they used to be. And the third part of this is no one has the right answer. And I work with a lot of leaders who feel like, wait, that's my job. I'm supposed to have the answers. Now, the best of leaders, I think, recognize their job isn't to have the answers. Their job is to create a space where the answers can emerge. Does that sound like what most of you are dealing with in your workplaces and in your lives?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So this is very much the reality of every place I've been in and my life. So what does it mean? Okay. So this triple threat reality is, I work with US federal government organizations. I've also lived in New York, working with a lot of private companies, and every one of them, some degree or other, is dealing with the increase in the rate of change, complexity of problems, and require new types of solutions. Not just new solutions, but new types. How do we find a new way of solving this thing, as opposed to just finding a new solution? So these triple threats require a new way of thinking. And my answer to that is emergence, which is another way of saying seeing around the corners. If you're dealing with all three of these, you have to be able to look around the corners and react based on what you're saying. You don't always have the time to go back and do analysis and refer to a strategic plan. You do have to sort of react in that moment and react proportionally so that you can continue to react as more things emerge. So let's break this down, these three things, a little bit of detail. The first one I talked about, exponential rate of change. I think most of you heard the term VUCA. Looks like someone's just joining. Okay. So VUCA is an abbreviation for volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. This is not a new term. This has been around for 25, 30 years. I think the fact that this term has become so much more common is recognizing the reality. And if you're in the US, one good indicator of reality is something called the S&P 500. This is an index that indicates which companies are the biggest and most substantial contributor to the US economy. This has been around for a very long time. Once a company joined the S&P 500, it was considered to be a mainstay of the US economy, because once a company joined in, they were pretty much there for a lifetime. That is no longer the case. We're getting so many new companies that are coming in that did not exist before, and we're seeing companies leave. So here's some of the companies that used to be among the biggest names that are no longer a part of it. Bears and Stearns is a massive financial company. Texaco is like one of the best known gas stations in the US. And two big technology companies, Circuit City, their retail empire is almost completely gone. And Compaq, Palm, I think we all know what happened to Palm. Wendy's, New York Times, these were considered pretty much the classic American companies, and they're no longer part of this. And you have a whole new type of companies that are now part of the S&P 500. So Amazon, probably not a huge surprise to most people, but not every company in here is well known, which just means that everything is just changing faster than it used to. And so the S&P 500, I think, is a really good way to look at this rate of change and how much more of it is happening than what we're used to. Okay. So when we talk about the increased complexity of problems, it certainly looked to me, and what I hear in the organizations I consult with, is most changes had pretty much an either or answer. You go left, you go right. And in a lot of cases, if you look over a historical time period, the pendulum swings back and forth. And that's a phrase we often hear. Oh, we've gone too far one direction, let's swing back to the other. That's reflecting a reality that in most of our historical examples, it was one-dimensional. You go one way or the other. Almost every company I work with has gone through parts of centralizing and decentralizing functions like IT. At one point, we have to have a centralized IT shop so that we can all get the most value. A few years later, probably the new leader, it becomes, no, we can't have a one-size-fits-all solution. We need to enable people to own their own choices and their own options. And the cycle continues. So think about this complexity of problems as switching from either or to what I call yes and. And in a yes and world, it's not just one or the other. It's a constant balancing act. So it's either that, or the other analogy I often use here is a kid's game of whack-a-mole, where you get all these animals popping up and you have to put them back under the covers or whatever it was. That's, I think, what a lot of organizations are dealing with. Every time they've solved one problem here, 4 other problems show up. And it does feel like you're chasing a moving target. And we see the society too. So for anyone who follows American politics, our political system is a mess. And for most people, it's like, oh God, I don't really like any of these people. Who's the least worst option I can live with? And that's also a reflection of complexity of the political system. The third part of this we talked about is not everybody sees the entire picture. What we see depends on our perspective and what we are prepared to see. So as I mentioned, I do a lot of work on cultural stuff like DEI and empowerment, innovation. And one of the things that you learn in that space is the world looks very different depending on the lens with which you're used to looking. So if you want to make change happen cognitively, as Monique mentioned earlier, I do, that does require people to look at things from different lens. So I want to stop here a moment and say, Does this translate for everyone? Are these examples things that you all recognize in your life and your works? Anyone
Especially
have
in the
any?
work, especially in the work environment. This is something I'm seeing every day.
Great. Omar, do you want to go ahead and get some examples, or anyone else? Just jump in. Like I said, this is meant to be a conversation, so please go for it. Christine, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you for that. No, I definitely will add that in terms of everybody has a different picture, and that's why context is really important. I mean, I think if you find that you're in a work environment where everybody has kind of like a kind of same background, or people hire for fit, which usually means sometimes that they're hiring people who are very similar to them. So if you are in an environment where there is diversity and you have a lot of, should I say, different thinkers in the room, it's much more beneficial because you can look on a problem just, in completely different ways when you have lots of different people with backgrounds and different backgrounds in there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Christina. Anybody else want to add from your examples?
Software development. You have too many different points of view. You have architectural point of view, you have the product's point of view, you even have an engineering point of view. And sometimes addressing that issue is not the same, seen the same way, or even thought that it could be done the same way. So getting that, I guess, shared understanding is a challenge itself.
Absolutely. So much of Agile happens within IT. And so a lot of my work has been within IT. And the way I think about all of these different perspectives is almost like you're building a layered view. So everybody puts down what they see. And then once we add all the different layers and perspectives, and then almost like a kaleidoscope, we're trying to move them around to say, okay, what is the thing that we can all agree on? What is the minimum shared understanding? Because that is the only way in which we can account for all these different perspectives. Thank you, Omar. Anyone else?
So I work in conjunction with many who dive deep into the more technical aspect of IT. I work on like the governance and policy side, and I can empathize with the fact that when people don't understand the huge picture, or they can't see the large vision, they're a lot more resistant to change, because oftentimes that will reveal that they don't know something. And so that can be kind of difficult to navigate around. But, we have to encourage that not knowing is okay, right? Like being able to speak up and ask these questions and feel confident in knowing that somebody will hopefully guide you to the answer is usually when people start to accept change. So I can empathize with making sure that people kind of see the bigger vision, and just explain it to them as we go along so that they don't feel siloed out.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicole. And so much of this is fears. We're talking about earlier automation and the fears. Change is scary. It's utterly normal, but it is also very scary. And sometimes I think we act as if, oh, as long as I don't name that fear, it's not real. And I think it's the other way around. I think it is naming the fears, calling it out and saying, hey, do you also feel this way? That is what gives us power. It is what helps us to embrace and succeed in change. Anyone else?
I just wanted to add, I think a part of the problem with fear that you mentioned, it like change, like you said, it's totally normal. But people, they're kind of performing, or they're sitting in a space of fear, but they don't realize they're there mostly because when you're in an organization, something just feels thrust upon you. So they're just reacting and they have no time to think about the fear because they are so overworked. So, I mean, I've seen it tons and tons of times because I've worked with IT departments. And literally, it's somebody has a new bright idea and they didn't check with the SMEs about it. So by the time that it's not really I kind of feel sad sometimes that the execs kind of go, oh, the IT team, they're just resistant and they're fearful. It's not really that. They felt like they didn't have a voice in the first place. So they don't even have any time to go, I'm fearful of this just because I don't know it. It's really just that I wasn't consulted. So they don't value my opinion.
Yes. I mean, Christina, you are hitting it, because this is so much of what I hear. And the way I describe it to my clients is, it's not that people don't want change. It's that they don't want to be changed. It's a different perspective. And so anyone who's in a leadership position or a change agent position needs to understand the difference. And the way I try to describe it is, let's invite people into the change process. Let everybody have a voice in what the change is, what it means for them, where we should go. Because it goes back to the previous thing about everybody knows something no one else knows. If we can put all of our different perspectives together, we are going to get a much, much more complete picture. And way too often, leadership doesn't do that. And one of the biggest complaints I hear is, yeah, somebody makes a decision and I get to go do cleanup. And that's such a human thing. And, you know, one of my current clients talks about, we don't have a technology problem. We have a culture problem that looks like it has a technology problem. And I think that's very, very true. Okay, Steven, yes. Okay. It's preparing people for change. It's giving them time to absorb and react. It's talking about what it means for them. And I think it's also acknowledge that not every change is going to be a win for everybody. Sometimes people lose as a result of change. And I think we have to acknowledge that, because the more we're in denial, the more the resistance builds up. So being open about, yeah, you know what? This particular change may not be good for you, create more work for you, but here's how we're going to make it up to you, or here's the value. Here's a different way in which somebody else is also having to change. It's absolutely, Padma, yes, there is information in the resistance. And most often my answer is, if people are resisting, do they feel like they are being changed as opposed to being part of the change? So that's usually how I think about it. And I think in this context of this change happening in organizations, what I go for is this: no one person has the answers. And I think leaders have a hard time with it, because, you know, most leaders are the type A students in school, right? They're proud of themselves for having the right answers. They know the answers. They come into the workplace, they're rewarded for great individual performance. And now suddenly the managers are leaders and they don't have the answers anymore because the problems are just too complex. So we talk about multidisciplinary, where everybody has to come together from different fields to come up with the solution. And a lot of the agile stuff is in here. The testers, the BAs, the developers, the architects, how does everybody contribute, right? To the cross-functional team. That is multidisciplinary, but that's not the only answer. Interdisciplinary is, I think, what I lean a lot towards, which is there's a whole new way of thinking and being and doing problem solving that is required, so that we all draw from our own disciplines and come up with something new. So, you know, Monique and Incher mentioned my background is in design thinking and lean and agile, all of those things. I do pull them all together for this new field of practice called organizational change. The last way to think about it is transdisciplinary. So it's not just you let go of the old to create something new. It's that everything comes together. There's a lot of overlap. And that is the kind of transdisciplinary approach that we need to solve complex problems. And let's face it, what most of us deal with these days in work or home or life is complex problems. So does this make sense to people, like kind of where I'm going for and why this different way of thinking and approaching problem solving may be helpful? And we've had some new people come in, so I want to make sure if anyone's had a chance to ask any questions they might have. So I think we basically said this is meant to be a conversation and not me talking for 90 minutes, because frankly, I'm not sure my voice will hold out for that long. So if you have questions or comments, please jump in.
I did have a question just in terms of for the transdisciplinary scenario. Can you kind of clarify like a bit more in terms of how it would work?
Sure. So a lot of times, most of the time, my work falls into interdisciplinary, right? So right now, I am responsible for changing the culture within an organization. And what they mean by that is they want to be more innovative. They want a high trust culture. They also want to integrate DEI. DEI is diversity, equity, inclusion. It's the idea, it's most often interpreted as gender, race, and sexual orientation. But to me, it's so much more than that. DEI is basically how can everybody be seen and feel and valued? So when you're trying to do an organizational change that is all these different things, the only way to make it happen is for everybody to contribute what they know from their field. And then we pick and choose how to put all these different options into practice to achieve this one change. Because if you're doing every single agile thing, like SAFe, and you're doing every single DEI thing, and you're doing every single lean thing, you're going to overwhelm people. They won't have time to do all this change in addition to their work. Instead, can we bring people from those three disciplines and say, okay, what is the common ground? What is the least amount of lean and agile and design thinking and DEI that we can do to achieve this outcome? Does that make sense? Okay. And then transdisciplinary is, rather than just bringing all those things together, it's really what I would call a cognitive approach. It's not just about adopting practices from different fields. It's about going to the underlying truths about each one. It's asking the why questions. Why do we have stand-ups in Agile? Why do we have postmortems in PM world? Why do we have listening sessions in DEI? Once we understand the why, we can come up with, oh, here are the different ways in which we could achieve the same impact. So we're not just borrowing tools and techniques anymore. We are digging deep into the why and then coming up with a new way of doing things. Does that answer your question, Christina?
Yeah, it does. So what I'm getting from this is, in order to get to the transdisciplinary phase, you still definitely have to do the interdisciplinary aspects of it.
I think so. I mean, can you jump around? Maybe. But in my experience, it does follow a little bit more linearly because these are new competencies. This requires organizations to connect people differently. And most organizations are still very siloed. So in my experience, we do start with multidisciplinary, then inter, then transdisciplinary.
Okay. And just a question, how many kind of organizations have you gotten to that transdisciplinary nirvana state? Because I'm a bit I'm like, okay, I'd like to know if that exists. It sounds heavenly.
I would not describe it as bring them there, right? So most of my organizations I work with, I think apply transdisciplinary in certain contexts. No one does it for everything. But in certain spaces and certain types of problems, we do tend to have explicitly calling a transdisciplinary approach. So right now I work for the Office of Information Technology, and we are explicitly integrating DEI into innovation and sustainability. So that is an example, I think, of transdisciplinary approach. Does it mean all of OIT is that? No. It just means to address this one particular problem, we do have a transdisciplinary team and approach. Does that make sense?
It definitely makes sense. Like I said, I always am curious to see things in action. I could love to see when things are working.
Absolutely. And I am lucky. The client I'm with right now, they're pretty extraordinary. And it took a very brave senior leader to say, hold on, DEI isn't something that we can do separately. We actually want our people to be innovative. Okay. One of the barriers to innovation is not everybody says what they think. And the way to address that is DEI. So shifting into these different approaches, it requires bravery. It requires someone to say, hold on, let's try something different here. So once he had that aha moment, it became part of my job. And I said explicitly, hey, listen, we're doing organizational change. Can we also put DEI into it? Because to me, those are together. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. Mm-hmm. And now for the past 1 year, we have been doing it. And to Stephen's point, it is the patience to see it through. These are not quick solutions. It's a lot of listening. It's a lot of individual and small group conversations. It's a lot of, well, that didn't work. What else can we do? Mm-hmm. And most of the time, there is no substitute for just doing the bloody hard work.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And that sounds really amazing if you have a leader who is involved, or should I say brave enough to actually acknowledge that DEI is important, because I've gotten a lot of lip service in the DEI space, and it always feels like lip service for a person of color when you kind of go, I've done the checklist, I've done this little box, and everybody has kind of done the DEI for the year, and that's done. So yeah, that's pretty much amazing. I hope it was the case everywhere.
No, it certainly isn't. And in this case, our executive sponsor for DEI is a middle-aged white man.
Yeah.
And he, we had some pretty intense conversations. He's like, look, for the first 1 year, did I feel really awkward being the DEI person? Yeah, because no one associates someone like me with DEI. And did I feel like I'm taking over someone else's space? Yes. But after having done this for a year, and I'm quoting him now, look, if someone who looks like me, is a DEI head, it can come across like you're trying to invite yourself in some place where you may not be wanted. But if I'm doing it, it feels more like propping the door open to invite others in, because I'm already in the room. And that's a very powerful insight. So he sees his role as an ally and an advocate, opening doors for others who might not have access that he does. And one of the ways in which he does that is me. He gives me a platform to have the ability to be in the boardroom. I mean, it's not like I can simply knock on the door and say, hey, let me in. It doesn't work that way. But he invites me in. And that's a huge deal.
No, it's important because you need allies. I think you need all of the kind of white middle-aged men to be allies and understand that, hey, it's just as important for you as it is for everybody else.
It is. So I'm good. Okay, awesome. Anyone else want to jump in? Please go for it. All right. So going forward a little bit, why is seeing around the corner so important? It's those 3 factors we talked about, but it also is the number of possible futures. There's always lots of possibilities, but it's even more possibilities now than there used to be. So when we talk about the exponential rate of change, that directly correlates to the increased range of possible futures. That is the number of different things that could happen. So as the number of different things that could happen increase, we have to get better at seeing around the corners, because that is the only way in which we can navigate, let alone succeed in this world. So does this metaphor make sense for everybody? So what I'd like to do is, I didn't realize I wasn't sharing. Okay, are you seeing this now?
Yeah, right? You're sharing. You're sharing.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's do this. What I'd like to do would you break up into small groups, and all of you talk to each other and with each other about how do these 3 things show up in your life and in your work. And then if you can prepare to share with the rest of us, I think we'd have a really good discussion. Is that okay with everybody?
Could you repeat what are the 3 things?
So, okay, I'm going to put in the chat, increased rate of change, increased complexity of problems, and no one entity has all the answers. Why is it I can never type when I'm on a screen? Okay, there we go. So I'm seeing, let's see. All right, why don't we do about 5 rooms. So each of you should have about 3 to 4 people. Think about how these 3 things apply in your work and your life, or frankly, like society, whatever you're looking at. And then let's come back and have an awesome conversation. Everyone good with that? About 7 minutes or so? Awesome. Let's go for it. Okay. I randomly put people in a room, and you should be able to join the room from your screens. All right. Nicole, Sophia, are you able to the room to join? Yes. Omar, do you want to join a room or do you want to hang out here?
Actually, I would want to hang out with you since everybody's there. In my case, my manager is trying to implement SAFE, and we are getting massive pushback. But then again, there's some interesting challenges that have arisen, and pretty much to the point that I was saying, the 3 different views of architecture, engineering, and product. So we're pretty much going through that, and it's been intense.
I was going to say, okay, Sophia and Nicole, you're welcome to hang out here because I think you're both in a room by yourself. And so
I need a breakout.
I'm sorry, what, Nicole?
I need a breakout room.
Okay, I can go ahead and put you in one. Hold on 1 second. Okay, let's see how I do this. Breakout rooms. Okay. Me too. All right, there you go, Nicole. You should see invite.
Okay, sorry.
No
worries. You're good.
No, you're good. So, Omar, I mean, how does your organization handle all these different?
Unfortunately, the agile implementation that they have is really bad. I think I'm willing to think that they brought on a coach, and that coach did a very bad job. They got rid of it, and then they made some changes at an organizational level that make no sense. To give you an example, we have no Scrum Masters at all. In my case, I'm the only product owner who is serving as product owner and Scrum Master at the same time in 2 different groups, and it's not great. It is not great. We have, there are some big organizational deficiencies, and it comes to definition of not being provided specifically by leadership.
Okay, so I'm seeing a number of warning signs. So one of which is, do they know that by definition, Scrum Master and Product Owner are meant to be opposing balancing factors? And if you have one person trying to do both, it is like wearing 2 hats at once, which means it does not work. That's the first thing.
I want to think they are aware. But to answer that, my manager, who is new, I think she's probably 6 months in at this point, and she came from a SAFE environment, so she's like, "We're gonna do SAFE." She even gave a leading SAFE training to get people involved, or at least get some people into the know. In my case, it was just a refresher, but it's something that we're trying to plow through it, but the resistance to do it is heavy. Right now, we have 2 managers pushing back, saying, "This is not going to happen. We're not going to do this." So
Okay.
it is challenging.
So this is definitely one of my biases. I am not a big believer in SAFE. I have seen very, very few good use cases for SAFE. SAFE tends to be very top heavy, very like, let's spend a lot of time giving everybody new titles and doing lots of training, as opposed to actually doing the work.
Yes, I agree totally.
Okay, so the thing about Agile, or frankly, any other change initiative, including DEI, is for most people, it is happening on top of an already full plate of work. So what are you taking off to make room for this? And every organization I know says, oh no, we can't possibly take anything off. It's all really, really important. We just have to make do. We just have to power through this. No, because lesson number 1 of Agile is if you cannot say no to anything, then you're not saying yes to anything either. Forced prioritization is a hallmark of Agile, as is WIP limits, work in progress. Like there's a reason these things exist. For better or for worse, if you try to take away these core things from Agile, you end up with a 3-legged stool that has 2 legs. It is not going to work. It's not going to be usable. So my question for your organization would be, why are you trying to do Agile or SAFe? Like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Do you even know?
Right now, to answer that, the answer is not one. It cannot be just one thing. It's multiple things. They say they're doing Agile. We're not. We're not. We're doing a Scrumban at best, and even that is, I would say, highly inaccurate at this point. After what I've seen, to your comment about the SAFe, yes, the previous company where I was at is SAFe. Actually, it's pretty much the framework of choice of that organization. You've heard of CGI, right? For them, it's like the Holy Grail, and they will try to get everybody on it.
Okay, so what I have been trying to do in my organization is get them away from SAFe into this. I just put something in the chat window. It's called the OIT mindset. And so this is something that that I pretty much crafted. And this is how we are thinking about Agile in my organization. And here, I'm going to share my screen really quickly. So, okay. It's lean system thinking, it's human-centered design, it's Agile. And we're talking about the outcomes first, not how we do Agile, but why do we do Agile? And I pretty much walk people through which outcome do you want, which approach is most useful for you, and how do we put it together in a way that makes sense for this organization?
Oh, this is awesome.
Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. One last question before we come up, and you don't have to answer this now. I did hear you mention that lean thinking, design thinking is one of your specialties. I'm looking to really get heavily certified in it. Please recommend me something so I can focus on this, because I really want to get better at it.
Okay, so again, bias. I don't do certifications.
Okay.
I technically have no certifications because most of them are things that you basically buy, but there are some good teachers and practitioners of design thinking I can connect you with, and you can take courses from them and learn. And I think that would be awesome.
That'd be great. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Okay, so let me get back to the rooms and make sure that everybody gets a chance to have their conversation. Okay. All right. We're going to close the rooms in about a minute, about 7 minutes. I'm liking this conversation, but I don't want to forget everybody else either. So
yeah, no worries.
Yeah, no, and definitely find me after this talk, and I'm happy to share with you. I do a lot of books, and I'm pretty much self-taught. So I have a list of books I use for design thinking and stuff, and there's some really good teachers and practitioners.
Okay, perfect.
And the second half of this talk actually goes into a little bit about how I do Agile and some of these things, and it's a different way of doing things. So maybe that will also help a little bit.
Oh, great.
Well, when Andrew and I talked about this, the intent was like, how do we get people who don't necessarily love Agile and whose only experience of Agile has been Scrum and SAFe to really understand what I call the promise of Agile. It's not the how, it's the why. Why would you benefit from Agile kind of thing? All right. Welcome back, everybody. Have some good conversations?
Yes.
Awesome. Anyone want to share anything from your conversations that struck you as being particularly insightful or aha moments? And you don't have to. It's only if you want to.
I'm waiting to see what other people say before I throw my 2.5 cents in.
That is absolutely fair. All right. So I'm going to call on someone because, one thing that we say in my organization is silence is consent. So if you don't volunteer, you get voluntold. So Lou, I'm picking on the fact that you know me, so you're used to this. Do you want to go ahead and share your examples or insights?
Yes, sure. So what we discussed in our group, well, I was just telling them my experience. I work in healthcare, and our organization, of course, with the ongoing pandemic, we had to pivot like rapidly. We're not talking about months, right? But pretty much days. And there was like a lot of pressure. But the organization always kept us informed of the changes that were going on. And I think that helped obtaining the buy-in from the employees, at least most of them, as far as I know. And it was a very successful change that had to be done like in a matter of days.
That's wonderful. I think what I heard is people were being invited into the process of change, right? It wasn't just happening to them. They
Correct.
were informed proactively, and that's really, really important. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else want to jump in? Listen, I don't want to pressure anyone, so if you want to, if not, that's totally fine. Okay, so.
I can share from our group. This is Simone.
Go for it, Simone.
And a few of the points that were raised were more around resistance and the conditions that, I guess, create resistance. So one person shared about being in a hierarchical environment, which of course makes people a bit more dependent upon being instructed about what to do and less inclined to be free thinking and to use initiative. It's sometimes a fear of embracing that type of approach to work. And so the company has shifted to that, where they want people to be more empowered and to think in a new way, but people are resistant to that based on the old way. And another example was also on working in a multi-generational workplace and the shift that millennials have brought to the workplace. Their mindset, their work ethics, and what can be seen as an inflexibility, a resistance to feedback and to listen to other people and listen to other generations, the older ones that may be trying to guide them or correct them or provide feedback. And they're more resistant to that. So that was what our discussion was around.
All right, talk about setting me up perfectly. So what you just said leads directly into where I'm going. So I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit here. Okay, computer, let's cooperate. Okay, so in navigating this VUCA environment, right? It's not about having a roadmap. It's more about using a compass. And the difference for me is in a roadmap, things are known, they're fixed, right? For example, if you look at a map of the US, okay, New York is always going to be in the upper right corner. That's where it is. Boston's always going to be higher than that. Florida is going to be south. Bahamas is always going to be to south of Florida. Like these are fixed things. That is not necessarily true in any kind of VUCA environment. There are very few fixed markers. Instead, it's more like sailing the ocean, where you sort of know roughly, yeah, there's vague things here and there, and then you have to navigate with a compass. You have to say, okay, what is north? It's not like there's, that says, hey, north is this way. You're using a compass point, which translate to core values, core behaviors, and you are navigating uncertain waters with those few principles or values. and then you're going to adjust and course correct continually. And so to do this, it's a culture of what I would call continual rebalancing. Whatever metaphor you want to use, the seesaw thing, whether it's multi-directional change, whether it's narrowing down to something or watching the trend lines, however you do it, it is a continual rebalancing. You are going to be making decisions every single day at every single moment. So it's not the big decision on, do I go right or left? It's 100 little definitions like, do I slow down here? Do I go faster here? Do I tilt a little bit 5 degrees this direction, that direction? That is how you navigate uncertain territory. Now, obviously, this is hard, right? So here are the foundational principles that I use. So this is what would be in my compass. First is recognize that you know the least when you start. And this applies to everything, whether it's a new friendship, a new effort you're doing, a new partnership, solving a new problem at work, creating a new team. It doesn't matter what the context is. Anytime you're starting something, recognize that you know the least about that thing when you're starting, which basically means plan just enough to get to the next step as opposed to planning for the whole thing. The corollary to that is try to go broad before you go deep. Example, you're planning a family trip, like it's someone's 60th anniversary and you want a big family celebration. Okay, you don't know a whole lot when you're starting. So what can you decide? So maybe it's something like, we want to go to London in 2023. You don't have to decide, we're going to book flights on this airline leaving from this airport on this day. We can just say, hey, we want to go to London 2023, and then collect information about what date and possible dates make sense for the most number of people. That is what I mean by going broad before going deep. Go for the big picture, the thin thread that connects throughout, rather than trying to get any one piece correct or perfect. The third principle, and this is a lot of where Agile comes in, and actually Omar and I are talking about this. When you're doing any kind of change effort, it's happening on top of an already full plate for most people. And that means two things. One, try to put in some kind of a cadence so people know what to expect when. It really helps to have people know every 2 weeks you will get to change and decide what the priorities are. At the end of every day, you can decide what's been done, what's not done. That's the cadence part. And the second part is time boxing. If you're recognizing that whatever new thing you're doing is on top of a full load, for example, that trip to London we talked about, instead of trying to spam everybody with emails every day, could we agree on, hey, once a week, everybody share what information you have or what you want, so that we can all spend an hour every Sunday talking about the options. That's an example of time boxing. And the last principle for using a compass approach to change is my favorite. It's the reality of human behavior, which pretty much means whatever you have in mind has to work for the very real human beings who are part of this effort. And human beings are very, very real. They're going to behave in the way they're going to behave. Trying to change human behavior is hard. It's a whole lot easier to work with human behavior than against it. So recognize people are going to be feeling angry, frustrated, or overwhelmed, rather than try to pretend those feelings don't exist. Okay, this is a lot in one slide. Anyone have questions or you disagree with any of these things on this slide? Otherwise, silence is consent. I'm going to assume that all of you totally agree on these 4 principles and we're all on the same page. And that's fine too. But if you're not, I would like to know and have that conversation. Okay, so I'm assuming that we're all on the same page. All right, we're going to keep going unless someone, jumps into the conversation. Okay. So
Leila, I'll ask you a question. So on the reality of human behavior, one of the challenges I face in one of my teams is we have a naysayer, and he's a very loud voice on the team, but the team will still experiment and try different things. but so often he takes over, and I've tried a variety of different ways to, pulling him offline, talking to him, etc. And working with his boss a bunch of different ways to try and get him to be more open and guiding and coaching to the team. But in the reality of human behavior, how do you deal with that one stone in the river?
Sure. So tell me a little bit about him. Why do you think he's so negative? What's driving him?
I'm aware that he has some personal issues going on, and that he just him and his wife split, and he took full custody of the kids. So there's obviously a lot going on for him. But how do we help him balance that he doesn't take that out on his teammates?
Sure. So has he been there for a long time?
Yes.
Okay. Have there been previous change efforts that have not worked?
I've only been with the team for a year.
Okay.
They hadn't, when I joined the team a year ago, they hadn't delivered 2 quarters in a row.
Okay.
But after the first quarter, they finally delivered what they've been working on.
So it's probably a combination of a few things. So at some point, he was probably young and starry-eyed and optimistic, and that's been drained from him. Combination of life and work. Great. Okay. But the point still remains that we need his behavior change for the team to be effective. So what I've done sometimes, do you use any kind of a social charter or team charter kind of thing? Like how does this team, okay. So
yeah, we're working agreements.
Okay. One of my working agreement favorites is I use Tina Fey's Bossy Pants book about yes and mindset. That is in a lot of my team's working agreements. That means if you're coming up with a problem, you also have to come up with a solution. So it becomes relatively straightforward to say, hey, Pete, how does this apply to our yes and rule? Remember that rule we talked about? So, and I have some content that I'm happy to send you. So it basically is, how do we choose to behave as a team? And then making it easy. There's some there's some activities that you can do to build this practice. One thing I've done is really simple. Let's tell a fairy tale. And it works in the virtual world too. So I start off with once upon a time, pass it along to you. You say something, and the next person keeps adding words. And honestly, if it's a pretty solid team, people are paying attention, and you're getting an awesome story. And almost always, by the way, it's evil agile coaches, evil product owner, something like that. That's kind of who becomes the bad guy, but you get a pretty cool story going. And then when the story ends, everyone's kind of laughing at that point. I think, God, was that hard? You actually had to listen, right? Like, yeah, that was hard. We should do more of that. So the next time someone doesn't listen and they're being negative, you can say, hey, remember the fairy tale? We need to create another fairy tale. Everyone starts laughing. It diffuses tension, and it reminds Pete, like, hey, we agreed on this thing, remember? So is there one magic trick to your behavior? No. But you can build a few different things in and reference them. And sometimes it really is, it's not just your job, it's the whole team. So once everybody agrees on a working agreement, like I've given cards that basically say, hello, breaking rule number 1, 2, 3, everybody has those. And peer pressure in that case can actually work pretty effectively. You don't want to be mean about this, but you're also being pretty direct. The team is there for this shared purpose. And if someone is not contributing effectively to the shared purpose, then their behavior has to be corrected.
Yep.
Does that help at all?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Awesome.
Can I ask a question, Leila?
Sure.
In terms of kind of dealing with human behavior, maybe I should ask Lori, is it the case that you actually had like a conversation with him like directly about it? Because I think you mentioned his manager or something like that, but I don't know, was there like just a little kind of like side chat kind of going, hey, I noticed that you had some ideas or some reservations about it. Has he been able to kind of voice them directly to you, or?
Yeah, we've had conversations through Slack at least. We haven't done a one-on-one face-to-face. His manager already said he was working on things, so I didn't feel it was my place to step in and intervene since he was already having those conversations. So it was a little bit difficult there. But on specific points that he'd bring up, he'd put them in Slack. Well, why are we doing this? Or I don't think I need to be there for that kind of things. And so I'd come back and tell him whether
put it in Slack. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know for me, Leila, and I agree with you about the points. I think sometimes if you have a direct conversation with a naysayer sometimes, they feel valued and they kind of feel that there's somebody who even listens to me a little bit. And sometimes that helps in terms of them not continuously going, oh, I'm going to say no, 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 no. But he'll kind of go, oh, yeah, I remember Lori had a chat with me and she asked me directly, like had a Zoom chat or whatever, just to kind of find out what my concerns were. Because typing can be kind of misconstrued sometimes.
Oh, 100%.
Absolutely. I mean, Christina, everything you're saying aligns with my experience. When I say reality of human behavior, people need to be heard first. They need to feel like they matter. And building those before you need them is how you get people to change their behavior. They have to feel like you hear them first. So my usual approach is, let's build some trust and some fun before I need to cash it in.
Yep. I like that.
Because I think people are like a bank account. You have to put deposits in before you can withdraw from it. And what deposits look like is different in every context. Sometimes it's even saying, taking someone out for a drink. It's inviting someone into it. One thing I often used to do is invite people in to plan a retrospective. Hey, it looks like you have really good insights into team behavior and dynamics. Do you want to help me design a retro? Like it takes different forms and there's never a right answer, but do this consistently and authentically. So it doesn't look like you're singling them out, right? But you're just being kind of the person that you are. And what you want is one, that you know what you're doing. And more importantly, you're there to help them. Any kind of coach or scrum master, that is the feeling that you want. Like, hey, Leila's here to make my work easier. And once you have that, that's when you can get people to change their behavior because they believe that you care about them, that you're there for them. And that is the absolute prerequisite for any kind of change, in my opinion.
That's awesome. Yeah, and Steven, I think you hit a nail on the head. He's moving from an individual contributor to a lead role. And so that whole thing about not necessarily understanding his value probably is a reality.
Yeah. And, very few of us are comfortable saying, I don't know. We are not very comfortable saying, I don't know, and I'm okay with not knowing, because most of our grades and promotions are based on knowing. And that's a huge culture shift. So making it easy for people to say, I don't know, I was wrong. Hey, you were right. Like all of this is the reality of human behavior. Awesome conversation. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay. All
I
right.
have
So
a question.
Sure.
He's talking about human behavior. How do you handle the person who is sort of presumptuous because they're the expert? They know the solution.
Okay.
And pretty much the solution tends to fall within their expertise. So they're going to give it. They're the only one that can advise on that solution because that's their lane.
So this is where the whole building the foundation kind of thing comes in, where we talk about putting in deposit before you can withdraw it. So when you're first building a team, if you can talk about these realities of business, the idea that problems are so complex that no one person can have all the answers, you're better prepared for this type of person because you can say, hey, picking on Pete today, Pete, that's an awesome idea. Okay, we're so glad we have your thoughts. Who else can add to this? Because remember, we're in this multidisciplinary phase, right? So we need to do yes and. Who else can add to this? So you're not invalidating them, but you are saying it always is more than one point of view.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. And I do apologize. Like my whatever cold flu thing is a little frustrating, so bear with me. Okay, so this is what it comes down to. These are the competencies I think we can do as individuals to survive and thrive in this culture. Someone once described me as this, and I kind of like adopted it because I think it is true. Trust provocateur, which basically means the opposite of being the negative Nancy always poking holes. It's actively creating trust as an invitation. It ties into that quote, seek to understand before being understood. It's, for me, this means actively trying to understand each person's job, not just their job and what they do it, but how do they do it? What matters to them? What motivates them? It's all of those things. The second one is a quote from a woman named Pat Reed, who does a lot of awesome business agility stuff. We're used to thinking of, if I see something, I believe it. And she said, it's the other way around. You have to have the belief first before you can see it. And the belief is in shared knowledge. It's in emergence. Some of these things you just have to believe before you will see it. The third one is, I think, what most of us do actively do. And this is learning to and improving how we observe, how we pay attention, how we learn to see through different perspectives. And I'm not claiming I do it all the time, by the way. So, this is definitely a journey. Thinking about the person you disagree with the most. What do they see? What do they hear? What does the world look like from their perspective? Now, I'm going to be pretty blunt here and say, I can do that in the workplace context. I have a whole lot harder time doing it in any kind of social political context. So we all have our lines on that one. And the fourth one is going where people want to be, not where you want them to be. Using that family trip metaphor from earlier, if the rest of your family wants to go to the Bahamas and hang out at the beach, then trying to maybe go to London is probably not going to work. So going where people are is important. And the corollary to that is doing what's needed, which may not necessarily be what you want to do. So this is the whole servant leader concept, right? What do they need from me at this moment to make this outcome happen? Focus on the outcome, not that particular how at a given point. And it goes back to the person who says, I don't know, and being okay with it. Know what you know and what you don't know. Set the example of being the kind of person who can say, I don't know and I want to learn, which really is growth mindset. Any questions about this? How much do you all see yourself in that list? Because I'm pretty sure most of you do this pretty instinctively.
Say there's a couple of things there that I'm a little bit challenged with.
What I will say is this, all of this is a journey. No one does it all the time first, right? But this is sort of how I set up my wish list. Okay, so when Andrew and I first started talking about this talk, one thing we talked about is, let's not start with Agile, because people tend to have I'd say Agile comes with a lot of baggage these days. And I think for a lot of people, Agile is interpreted as Scrum or safe or whatever. So this is what Agile means to me, and which I hope it makes more sense in the previous hour's conversation. Agility is an attribute of an organization's ability to survive and thrive amidst unprecedented change. This is what I mean by agility and Agile approaches. It has very little to do with frameworks and how we do it, but really it is a competency our organization can cultivate to be successful. And obviously the same applies to individuals. Does this make sense for people where I'm going and why I talk about it now rather than the beginning? Yes, okay.
The problem is that most companies, that definition itself, that is not viewed that way. It is more the understanding is more around of getting things faster, and the adapting to that unprecedented change is, we know that things are changing, but if we do things faster, it's more concentrated on the fastness than rather than adapting to the change.
Well, I never claimed I was any kind of typical Agile coach. So this is what I think agility should mean. And everything else, speed, innovation, delivering business value, is a byproduct of this core competency. If you do this, everything else will happen organically. If you don't do this, everything else is going to be forced and at risk of backsliding or stopping very frequently. And so the way I put together, by the way, is something called the compass for agility. This is how I do my organizational change work. There are 5 steps. The inner circle: ideation, identification, intake, inaction, introspection. Each step has 3 different ways in which you can do it: small, medium, large. And every client chooses which level of investment they want to use for what step, but they do have to do all 5. And I use this approach for any scenario in which we don't have all the answers, which, very conveniently happens to be pretty much all the work that most organizations are doing. And the basic idea is you have to, and Omar, back to our conversation about Agile, why are you doing this? What is the value proposition for whatever new thing you're doing? That's the vision. Then it's the reality check. How far away are you? Using the London family trip as an example, wouldn't it be a very different journey if you knew, oh, everybody lives in the US, or everybody is scattered across 4 different countries between Africa and Asia? You're going to have different options. So knowing where you are in relation to the vision is very, very important, because that is how you can prioritize. If you're all coming from the US, you might want to agree on, okay, let's all go through New York. You're coming from 4 different countries. That's not going to make a whole lot more sense. It just might be everybody get to London, whatever way makes sense for you. We'll start the trip in London. And that's fine. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's just knowing the difference and what is the priority in that particular context. What I call inaction is a traditional Agile, Scrum, Kanban, SAFe, whatever you want to call it, getting stuff done. How are you getting stuff done? Introspection ties into the Agile retrospective, but it's so much more than that. Mostly when we do retrospective, we look back 1 step. How are we doing? How do we get better? To me, that misses the point. When we reflect back, we have to go through the whole cycle. Was our vision accurate, on target? Was our reality check really real? What did we miss? Did we prioritize the right things? And did we get things done? How do we get better at all 5 and not just this one thing? So the way it typically works in my world is 30-day cycle. We do it 3 times. And every organization picks the techniques they want. The basic idea is if you pick the same techniques each time, you get better at them. If you choose different techniques each time, you get broader insights. So whether it's really about deeper insight or broader insight, it's up to each organization. And in 90 days, we aim for a single problem. And sometimes the problem gets adjusted as we learn more. Sometimes it is a problem we thought at first. Either case, in 90 days, we usually have pretty good results in solving the problem or getting it to something that can be sustainable. Okay, that was hopefully not too much. Did that make sense how I put all these things together in my work?
That was awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So I hope what I really wanted to do is talk about agility as opposed to Agile and really reinforce the idea that it's not about doing Agile, being a Scrum Master or whatever. It really is just about being who you are and adapting and surviving and thriving among the change that we all have. Andrew and I talked today about, like putting on a happy face and doing something because I have the cold from hell. I was like, oh my God, my voice feels so off. I don't want to. And you just, this is reality. All of us have so many things we're doing. We're asked to not even multitask, but multi-exist. We are husbands and wives and daughters and sons and parents and nieces and nephews and coworkers and neighbors and leaders. And that's just a lot piled on everybody's plate. So I hope that agility and the approach I'm talking about today is something that you can apply to yourself, to your work, and to your world, whatever's happening in it. Okay. Any questions, concerns, thoughts?
Well, I have a comment. I'm not sure how you would have presented your topic, but you gave me a lot of food for thought. I can say what I like about your topic is it focuses on every aspect of life, not just at work, but also at home, because you're dealing with people and getting things done. And your perspective and the statement that was placed about resistance having, that's even information. And pursue that. And I always like when persons indicate that people give responses based on their perspective or their existence of things in life. And that's a good reminder. So the bottom line is to seek to always try and understand why people are thinking the way they're doing, because it may not really be anything that they resist per se, but you need to try and understand what it is they're trying to communicate and touch bases, because if you do, you may find that you actually working towards the same goal, but miscommunication is causing that. So thank you so much. Very good information. Thank you.
My pleasure, Monique. And, you know, I have a 3-year-old niece, and we just set up her first Kanban board. And we have 2 of them. We have one upstairs in her bedroom. That is her nighttime routine. There are 5 things that she has to do every evening between the time they go upstairs and she falls asleep. And the way we have it set up is her mom cannot move anything for her. She has to move it. And so she loves it. Like, Mom, you can't touch my board. It's mine. Only I can do it. And, you know, we talk about empowerment in the agile sense at work. Like, she loves it. She's 3.5 years old. And it's like, nope, Auntie made a board for me. It's mine. No adults allowed. Like, and she marks it off and checks her stuff. And it's, you know, we have another little Kanban board that is by the front door. And it's before you go to school, what things you have to do. Backpack, shoes, water bottle, whatever. It's hers. And what it does is it limits the amount of nagging parents can do, because her mom can't say, you know, wear your shoes. All she has to say is your board up to date. That's all she can say. And so, you know, making people feel like they have agency and autonomy, it's a powerful thing. So absolutely, yes.
Well, we still have a few minutes left. So I know that we might want to make some additional questions, but before we go, if everybody can humor me and turn on their cameras so we can take a picture of this session, appreciate that, so that we can then post this on LinkedIn, which is normally where we complete all our posts.
I need a moment not to fix my hair or anything, but to activate the camera on my privacy settings, okay?
You need to get the camera closer to the light.
You know, while we're doing the cameras ready, I will say that I have a whole lot of nieces and nephews. And so they are my test subjects for a lot of my agile gamification stuff, because they are so incredibly direct. They will tell you, okay, I'm bored now, this sucks. Or like, this is kind of cool, I like this. And so you get very honest, authentic reactions from kids. And also, they're pretty bribable. So food, brownies, pizza tends to work pretty well. So that's usually how I do it.
Okay, so everybody ready? Okay, so smile, and 1, 2, 3, and go. Okay, thanks everyone, and whoever has questions, please proceed.
Awesome. So anyone have any questions or anything you want to talk about? Wow.
It was really informational, and even though I thought some of these I already knew, I thought, but you proved me wrong, because you gave me a new perspective, Leila. So thank you. It was very informational.
You are so welcome. And I think, you know, there's very few new things in the world, right? It's combining things slightly differently to help us see things a little bit different. And I think that's where the challenge is. How do you mix things up just a little bit different to get people to see something that wasn't obvious before? So thank you. To me, it's a compliment I appreciate.
I really appreciated your talk today. And definitely helped me get to look at some things in a different perspective and kind of refresh my own approach. So thank you.
My pleasure, Lori. And this, intentionally or not, anyone who chose to embrace being a Scrum Master, Agile Coach, Product Owner, Agile team member, we accepted a lifelong journey of learning and growing and being challenged, because this job is never the same 2 days in a row.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, if you wanted easy, simple solutions, don't go into any of these areas, because I have never found them to be those. Yeah.
Well, and it's amazing. I talk about that all the time. It's the things that make you a great Scrum Master are not the things that you covered in your class. Like, you need the basics, absolutely, but it's so much more than that. There's a lot of soft skills involved.
It does, and I will say that, like I said, my parents don't get it. My mom still thinks like, wait, you get paid to color and like buy colorful Post-its? Like, how is that a job? Because my niece thinks that like I have the coolest job ever, because she comes into my office and sees all the colorful Legos and markers and Post-its. So for her, it's like, oh, you have a job that you get to play, and she's not wrong. A lot of things from Agile and this stuff, it is play, and I do a lot of gamification. So I think for me, the value of this kind of work is when you see people, their face lights up, like they've learned something new today, or they've done something different today. And it's like, or they see the value they provide. And those aha moments, to me, those are the most amazing reasons why we do what we do. Thank you, everybody. And anyone who finds me on LinkedIn, you're welcome to. I will warn you, as Andrea has already said, I am not particularly active on LinkedIn. So give me some grace on when I respond to you, but I promise I will eventually.
Okay, well then, Leila, thank you for coming on. Everybody who came on to the session, thank you for joining us. If you liked it, please at least give us a quick mention on LinkedIn, spread the word, invite people as well. We appreciate any new traffic that you can come on. You're more than welcome to join us, and even if you want to be a speaker, anything about project management, Agile, or any topic that you think is relevant to these practices, please feel free to join us. We will not close the door on anybody. We're all beginners here. This group is relatively new. We're coming up on our year in September. So please feel free to either contact me, Monique, Andrea, which is the founder of this group, and we will definitely take you into account.
Yeah. Question: are PMP PDUs available for this event?
Yes, ma'am. There are PDUs and SEUs available.
But the PDUs are self-reported, so you'd have to go into your PMI dashboard and self-report it. But if you want, I could share with you over an email. If you put your email in the chat, I could send you an email with instructions how to report the PDUs.
Okay.
I did get a question about
no, I responded that the SEUs are for Scrum Alliance credential holders. So once you log into your Scrum Alliance dashboard and you click on the link will automatically assign the SEU.
If anybody wants,
go ahead, Leila.
I just got a message. Anybody wants copies of my slides or anything, just let me know. LinkedIn's probably the easiest way to find me, but I'm also going to put my email in here, and just let me know what you're interested in, and I'll be happy to send you an entire slide or a particular slide.
And Leila, if you wanted to, you could take a moment and let them know about Lean and Agile.
Sure, my favorite topic. So, as Monique said earlier, Lean and Agile, or LEA as we call it, is an organization that I co-founded about 2-3 years ago now. It is basically for women to learn and grow together. Padmini and I started Leah because so many of the things that make for good or great agile coaches are stereotypically feminine, empathy, listening skills, collaboration, all of those things. And yet the vast majority of agile coaches, especially the ones that get paid really well, are still male. And that, when I first pointed out, I was told, oh, be patient. It takes time. Come to conferences, be a speaker, and all of those things. And I did, and she did, and it didn't change, not enough anyway. So we created Leah as a way to accelerate that path. You don't have to be doing anything agile related. Most of our members have nothing to do with agile. It's just really a place where you can be seen and heard and valued for who you are, and you learn and you grow together. And the basic idea is that we all know something no one else knows. So let's learn and teach so that no one woman has to feel like she's doing a very difficult thing by herself. So if you want more information on Leah or join something, let me know. That is always my favorite topic to talk about. So, and the one thing that we are doing in terms of Leah is, so we've always been, by women, for women kind of thing. But this summer, we're going to be releasing our first series of podcasts on allyship. And each podcast session is a conversation with a male ally in my life or the life of somebody I know. And we're going to be talking about what it means to be an ally. What can men do to support and empower women? And so, when we first came up with this, the inspiration was, I'm in a position in my life right now where I have all these amazing allies, and it makes such a huge difference to my work and my life. And I was describing this in a Leah spiral, and almost everybody said either, oh my God, I've never had that, or I really wish I knew what that felt like. Like, just for a moment, I wish I could be in your shoes and feel that support, which honestly is heartbreaking. So I talked to all these guys in my life and said, okay, listen, would you be willing to talk about this and see how other guys can do it? And I will say I'm surprised, but every one of them said yes, including, by the way, my clients. They've agreed to come on and talk about some very, very personal stuff. Like, why are they an ally? In what way are they an ally? Why does it matter to them? So that is something we're doing this summer. So hopefully that resonates, because the takeaway I want from this is, for women and people who are in minority groups, what can we do to cultivate and build these kind of allies? And for those who are in a position of privilege, how can you be an ally for other people? So any questions or ideas on that? I would love it. Okay. And we're officially over our time box. Thank you all so much. I will wish you good luck and good health.
Thank you, Leila, for joining
Thank
us.
you, Leila.
And we appreciate you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you all so
Definitely
very
great
much.
meeting.
Thank you,
Great
Leila.
session.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for coming.
But Leila, good night, Leila, before you leave.